So now that we've covered how 3D campaigns work, let's jump into targeting, how important this is. So the second key of success on YouTube is in reaching the right customer with the right message at the right time. If you've ever used Facebook ads, you know how important and powerful targeting can be. Well, what we're doing today on YouTube is bringing that kind of targeting capability, but we're bringing it to video and we're bringing it to YouTube. So let's look at how we do that. So within targeting, Google gives you a lot of options for targeting because it's such an important element of success. But not all targeting options solve for the same outcome. So again, here's our friend, the funnel. And it's important to think about targeting at the right stage in the funnel. And you want to use the right tactic for the kind of volume and the traffic that you want to drive at the various points throughout the funnel. So at the top of your funnel, you're going to be focused on broadcasting. And the target is really to get reach and frequency. And the idea is simple. If the customers aren't aware of you, they can't even consider you or your product to purchase. So we want to get as much of broad awareness as we can. It's a very branding-centric tactic. Then when we go into the middle of the funnel, the targeting becomes more specific. And we get down into very particular things like keywords and placements. And we can then use remarketing and retargeting because we know that we've reached the person in the top of the funnel to begin with. And then ultimately, at the bottom of the funnel, you want to use targeting around offers and really tune up the remarketing and retargeting effort there as well. So let's take a look at what YouTube gives us. So out of the box, YouTube will give you some really nice capabilities to do targeting. And let's start at the top of the funnel. The most common are ways to do demographic targeting. So are we trying to reach males or females in the US or international? Are we trying to reach a certain age group and so forth? So demographic targeting is a very smart tactic, especially, for instance, if you're going to be promoting, let's say, a nightclub. You don't want to have a nightclub be promoted to someone who's not old enough to go there, right? So that kind of focus of the match of the demographic, you want to have age appropriate. That would make sense. And the same thing goes for geography. If you don't sell internationally, don't waste your media by marketing to people who are not in the country that you're serving. So the next issue is interest and topics. So the way that this works is that Google will match the past search behavior of that person and combine it with the profile data of that person, where people are self-identifying to Google what they're interested, what they care about. And Google can match that kind of interest together with the content that it has, and it gives you a pretty decent way to say, we want to have this kind of person who, say, is interested in travel. We want to have our travel content or ads be pushed to those people. So tapping into the interests and topics that they care about can be very powerful. The problem comes in where it's too generic to really get into that middle and the bottom of funnel. So while these are great for the top of the funnel, if you're trying to get conversions and you're trying to get engagement, you need to go deeper on your targeting. You need to go further than this top of funnel. And here's a good example of why this happens and how it happens. So when you have something like a Taylor Swift video, it's a very popular video, 1.6 billion views. So you have a lot of people who will watch it. And if you're targeting your ads to run to popular content, there's so many cases where your ad is going to get served in front of content like Taylor Swift. Now, we all love Taylor Swift, that's great, but if your goal is to get people to think about your travel site, or your, buying shoes from your website, or downloading your video game, it may not be relevant to have someone who's watching Taylor Swift videos actually translate into engagement or conversion. And another aspect that you need to consider is that there's very little control when you use those top-of-funnel interest and demographic targeting. It's like Forrest Gump. Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. And you will fill your order, but it may not be with something that actually is going to be relevant to your customer, or more importantly, to your brand and to your product. So what does work? Well, the most powerful and the gold standard for targeting is to use the content that people are watching, and to align your offer and your brand with that content. And we know this because Google's product, Google Preferred, is the most expensive and arguably the most effective tactic that you can buy on YouTube today. Now, the problem that a lot of brands have is that they can't afford it. It's not uncommon for brands to spend over $1 million a year to qualify for Google Preferred. And that puts it just out of reach of too many brands and too many companies that otherwise would love to be able to reach their audience by targeting the content that they care about. And the other issue is that it's very exclusive. A very small number of brands are going to qualify with the volume and the sophistication to execute a Google Preferred campaign. So it's great, it's expensive, and it's exclusive. So how do we get that kind of power of targeting around content without having to spend the kind of money that the top 10 brands can't afford? And Google's recognized this, and they've recently opened up their platform to allow you to target content, but do this at a much smaller budget scale. And the next section here is going to be on how we actually do that. So this tactic of content targeting is also known as placement targeting. We're targeting where we're going to place our ads and our videos in relation to very specific content. It's an advanced tactic in YouTube. You'll find it within AdWords, and it works extremely well because it takes advantage of the effectiveness of content alignment. But there are two huge limitations with the built-in approach. The first is that it doesn't scale because it's too hard to find the kind of videos that you're looking for, and it's manual. So keeping up with the changes and the speed at which YouTube is evolving is very, very difficult. Well, let me explain. When you look at the scale of what YouTube is, the first challenge is that there's over 1.6 billion videos on YouTube today. And so if you're going to go through YouTube and find relevant videos that are aligned with your brand and aligned with your offer, that's very, very difficult to do because you're literally pouring through millions and millions and millions of videos. And that's more than a full-time job. So the second thing is the rate of change, and the speed at which people have loaded up content onto YouTube is mind-boggling. Every 60 seconds, more than 400 hours of content is loaded onto YouTube. So in the span of this webinar, there's literally thousands of hours of content that's been loaded up onto YouTube. Okay, so it's big, it's popular. What does that have to do with content targeting? Well, the issue is that the peak view period of when fresh content comes out, it spikes rapidly in the first 3 weeks of publishing. And you can see that it tops out in the second week, and then it rapidly declines. And so if you don't have that content that's hot and fresh, that just got published in your placement groups to target, then you're going to miss out on millions of potential opportunities. So not only is it impossible to keep up with how much new content, it's super important to get that content while it's fresh, because if you get it loaded in, you're going to have only a fraction of the opportunities to actually benefit from the targeting in the first place. So that's where software really is the only way to go. And this is why we built the product Bright Amplify, is to give you the power of targeting with the tools to scale. And the way that it works is that it aligns your content that is interesting to your customer and that's relevant to your brand. So you think if you're trying to reach people who are going to travel to Costa Rica, then you'd want to find content about Costa Rica that's related to, say, travel, maybe the beaches or the rainforest, because those are the kinds of videos that your prospective customer is going to be interested in watching. And we're really focused on the intersection between the two. So mapping the keywords and the content that's relevant to your audience is step one. Once we know that, our software will go through the long tail and it'll search through those 1.6 billion videos automatically. And what it's looking for is very similar to long tail keyword search type content. And it'll find those really niche, hyper relevant, super interesting pieces of video that could be about, for instance, in that example of a travel agency going to Costa Rica, it could be a local's guide to the best surf spots in the northwest part of the country. And there may be a handful of videos, but for the people who are searching for those videos are incredibly important because they're very authentic, they're long tail, and it's very specific to the interests of that person. And it couldn't be any more different than, say, a Taylor Swift video, which has nothing to do with surfing in northwest Costa Rica. So that long tail is where we find that high converting, high relevant content. And so by identifying and discovering that, what Bright's Amplify product will do is pull back literally hundreds of thousands of relevant videos that are on that long tail. And the result of that is huge performance gains. And we know that it's working because you get much higher click-through rate, much higher view-through rate, and many more conversions that are much more cost-effective than if you were to do it by hand. Oh, and by the way, the software does it 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So it doesn't require human effort. You don't have to do it every day. It's algorithmic and programmatic, which means that you tell it what you want and then it constantly updates and constantly gets the fresh content. So let's give you a specific example. We did a project with Microsoft. Microsoft was looking to target laptop buyers that were watching review videos on YouTube, unboxing videos, the best videos of 2015, so forth. And Bright was able to scour all of the videos on YouTube and identify the best long tail content. And by focusing the ads that Microsoft ran just on these hyper relevant videos, we outperformed on a click-through basis just completely blew away the benchmark and delivered enormous performance relative to the standard benchmark. So they had a ROI from this engagement because they weren't wasting media. They were reaching the right person, the laptop buyer, with the right message, offer and information about this new technology in the laptop, Windows 10. And they did it at the right time when someone was watching videos that were reviews about the best laptops in the holiday season. So that's an example of where getting all those things to align resulted in much higher performance for the campaign.